So, how do I tell this story without coming off braggadocious or making myself look like an idiot? So, basically, in 2016 2017 area, there was an online casting call for directors that was placed on Reddit, and it was people looking for 5 film directors in order to direct a movie with a set budget of around $7,000 to $8,000. In this casting call, they specified that a big director would be backing, producing, and potentially being involved in some way on these projects. Immediately, I knew who this was. I knew it was Robert Rodriguez, and I remember kind of being excited because I was a huge fan of Robert Rodriguez's 10-minute film school. I really always loved the way he edited his films, and I think he was a huge inspiration on how I got into filmmaking. So after a few back and forth messages, I was getting kind of grilled from a casting director from the Oprah show and as well as Catfish. And this lady was basically asking me a bunch of questions and gauging who I was, the work I was putting out, and at some point this culminated in a big interview where I spent about 20 to 30 minutes talking to this casting director, and she explained that Robert Rodriguez was putting together a show and all this stuff. And it was really exciting because they were very, very interested, it seemed to me at least. They were saying to me that potentially I was one of the people they were very interested in, and they were excited to potentially work with me. They said, okay, in a couple weeks, we're going to get back to you. We're kind of whittling down to the final people who are going to be on the show, and we'll get back to you. And what really sucks is, at that moment, I never heard back from them. So I had kind of got all this stuff together. I was working on a script, a crew, because they were saying that you might need to have this stuff all ready to go because we need people who are ready for the show. And so I got a cast of people that were vaguely interested. I had a script that I was writing that I knew I could produce for the $7,000. And that call really never came. And that's where the clickbait thumbnail sort of ends, but where I really want to take this video going from here. So the truth of the matter is, I could have very well made a film with Robert Rodriguez. Considering the interest level of these producers, it seemed like I was definitely one of the people they were eyeing and thought was qualified enough to make a project with Robert Rodriguez. It just didn't happen to be the project and the time for me to do this. So I waited a couple months and I decided to work on a completely different project, something called The Long Con, a film that I'm currently promoting and releasing right now, a few years later. And I started writing this, and it wasn't until I wrote the film and put it through production and got through post-production that I had a little bit of a mental breakdown. When the editing of The Long Con was getting towards the middle stages, and it was probably at its worst in terms of the audio quality, the production quality, the show Rebel Without a Crew dropped, and I wasn't on it, and it really fucking stung. And it was a humbling experience. It truly brought me down a level, and I think it was something I needed to have happen to me. I contemplated quitting filmmaking completely. I was really, really at my lowest point, and I didn't want to go any further because I got rejected by my hero. I mean, Robert Rodriguez, not directly, but his company said no. They didn't want me. They didn't think I was the Rebel Without a Crew. They thought I was just some random guy who wasn't talented enough or not brand worthy enough. And that really, really stung. And that's what the video today I wanted to make is about. Is what did I learn from this experience? I found my true voice, and I think what is amazing about this is that even though I was not in the Rebel Without a Crew, I realized that I was. That ultimately, what did I do? I went out and I made a film with no money, less money than Robert Rodriguez did to make his first feature film. I went out with $2,000 and made a feature film basically on my own with me and a DP. And I learned that to be a Rebel Without a Crew, you don't need the validation of some big Hollywood director. Because let's face it, Robert Rodriguez isn't the $7,000 filmmaker anymore. He's the guy handling like Alita Battle Angel, making $300 million budgets. I thought I needed that validation, and it was something that kind of snapped in me. And when I realized that that validation was no longer needed, that I could make the film, I could be a rebel without a crew, it truly reaffirmed and resupported and made me feel like I could really truly do it. So I think, in a way, Robert Rodriguez kind of did help me make my film. He kind of did put me on the path, because if I didn't receive that rejection, I don't think I would have went out and tried as hard as I could. I wouldn't have put together a full cast. I wouldn't have worked on a film for 15 days for free in order to get other crew members to be a part of my film. I wouldn't have made 3 feature films for the total combined budget of like $3,000. It just wouldn't have happened without that rejection. So Robert Rodriguez, in a certain way, by not saying yes, was the best and most helpful thing for me. And I think the point I want to make today is you don't need the validation or the approval of your heroes or anyone in order to go out and make what you want to make. And if that means making low budget films, Hollywood films, whatever it is, you don't need that validation or approval. You need to go out and make it yourself. And in some ways, it's good to not have the approval of someone that you really actually admire, because now you are forced into a situation where you have to prove people wrong. My hope is one day Robert Rodriguez sees one of my films, perhaps, and is like, damn, I wish he was on that show that we did. Who's to say if that will ever happen? But I think without that sort of not being able to actually achieve a specific dream of mine, which is to work with Robert Rodriguez, I think I worked so much harder and got so much better as a filmmaker. So this is a little story. I want to start telling these little story time videos about parts of my filmmaking journey, parts of my filmmaking life. I have another good story about how we made a short film for a Ridley Scott competition. That's a very interesting video. If you want me to tell that story, comment below and tell me that you want to see that story. Also, I made a video about Joel Haver and how he rose to fame with 1,000 subscribers all the way to 1 million subscribers. Please, if you have a moment, go check that video out. I put a lot of effort into it, and I'm really excited because I think that video is really great, and I'm just going to be starting to make more and more content. So if you would love to, please subscribe, please comment, please like, do everything, whatever you can. Thanks, and have a great one.